The marvelous story of Bill Walton's life is so much more than 2 titles at UCLA, 3-time NCAA Player of the Year, 2 NBA championships, and enshrinement in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Who he was and the effect he had on those around him far eclipsed his accomplishments on the court. His coach John Wooden envisioned his future star's potential before he ever stepped on the court in Westwood.
We do have a fine big prospect by the name of Bill Walton from Helix High School in San Diego. And he's about 6'11", and we think he's a fine prospect. I like particularly his defensive potential. Incidentally, he's a 3.8 student.
Although they contrasted in many ways, Wooden and Walton would form a friendship that lasted over 3 decades. Said Walton, "I was John Wooden's easiest recruit. I became his worst nightmare. I drove the poor guy to an early grave when he was 99. A champion and NBA MVP with the Portland Trail Blazers in 1977, a series of injuries would cut his playing career short. At the age of 28, Walton overcame a serious stuttering problem and turned to broadcasting, a success he later called his greatest achievement. Fueled by an insatiable curiosity and a foundation of knowledge beyond sports, instilled by his mother Gloria, a librarian, and father Ted, a music teacher, Bill brought a most entertaining and unique perspective to broadcasting.
Please, don't you know anything about glockenspiels?
Bill Walton here, high in the Rockies, talking to the Buffaloes.
This is the Conference of Champions. What more could you ask for?
Get out there.
Ernie, time to throw it down. Let's go. Whack. Whack.
Take a bite out of it while it's lit. While it's lit? Say, oh, I'm kidding.
The end of the year is coming, or is at the beginning. I can't figure it out.
As I was getting up this morning and the moon was going down to the west over Mount Charleston, covered with snow.
I hope that made sense. I lost complete track of where I was.
I love my bike. I love the Pac-12.
I'm not a hugger, Duck. I'm a tree hugger. 1, 2, 3. Here we go.
His love of music, literature, natural wonders, and basketball shone through within every show. Bill was always interested in learning and sharing the stories of others, and his enthusiastic, selfless delivery was without limits. Bill is survived and celebrated by 14 grandchildren, 4 sons, and his wife, Lawler. Both those he knew best and those he met once were all affected by his passing due to his remarkable ability to connect.
I love the Pac-12. Thank you. Thank you for my life.
Welcome to another edition of Walton Wednesdays on Pac-12 Insider. Each week during this season, we're reliving broadcasts featuring Bill Walton from past Pac-12 games. We know you've been experiencing once again the enthusiasm and the endless entertainment that Bill brought into all our lives. And we'll continue to have friends of Bill joining each week to share their stories and memories. So, as Bill would commonly say, save it for air. That's what we do as we kick it off with tonight's broadcast. In Bill's memory, the Waltons warmly encourage donations to the UC San Diego Foundation. Proceeds benefit the Dr. Stephen Garfin Orthopedic Surgery Clinic, named after Bill's spine surgeon and friend, here with wife Cheryl. For more information, visit give2.ucsd.edu. Search and select Hillcrest Outpatient Pavilion Fund.
Hi, I'm Dave Pasch. I worked with Bill for many years at ESPN. We started on NBA together in 2006 and then did Pac-12 basketball together beginning in 2012 for 11 years. Bill introduced himself to me as Bill with 2 L's, which he did to just about everybody. And the thing that stood out to me the most about Bill is how people connected with him despite their worldview. All shapes, ages, sizes seemed to have a connection with him. And he treated everybody with love and respect. He always had time for people. And he loved to tell stories on the air about people because Bill cared for people. One of a kind, for sure. One of my favorite on-air Bill stories was a game at the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas. It goes to overtime, and Bill gets up to go to the restroom. And Bill could not run, so it took him a while to get there. Everybody in the front row turned around to look at me because the game continued and Bill wasn't there. And of course, we love to shoot Bill doing anything, including taking his shirt off or eating his energy chews. And so we put a camera on the bathroom and just waited for Bill to reemerge from the bathroom. And when he did, he just walked on the court, took his time, almost ran into an official. And by the time he was seated back to call the rest of overtime, about 2.5 minutes had gone off the clock. Bill was on his own time. The most memorable Bill story for most people is when he ate the lit candle attached to a cupcake. I just dared him to eat the cupcake while the candle was lit, and he took that as an opportunity to actually eat a candle. And he did it twice. After the game, we were at Arizona State, and Bobby Hurley was a big Bill Walton fan, and so Bobby, because Arizona State had won, came over to do an interview with us. And Bill did it again for Bobby, and the look on Bobby's face said it all. It's the same look and thought that we all had. What is this guy doing? The last game that I worked with Bill was at USC, and we were talking about George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, coming out of a break, and I completely jokingly said to Bill, "Didn't you audition for Chewbacca?" And he went with it and said, "Not only did I audition for Chewbacca, but George Lucas made Chewbacca, made up the character in my image and fashioned him after me." And we were just totally messing around, but people bought it. And man, Twitter went wild. There were articles written by People magazine and Hollywood Reporter investigating the story the next day. And Bill and I were having dinner after the game, just dying laughing at how people found everything Bill said interesting and intriguing and curious. And Bill didn't care whether it was true or not. He was just having a good time.
A friendship with Bill Walton was not complete unless it involved the Grateful Dead. Anybody that knows Bill understands his complete devotion. The last count I heard was over 400 live shows in his career. I was blessed enough to go to one right here in San Francisco, New Year's Eve 2019. Bill Walton welcomed my wife and I into Chase Center. He gave us these stickers, these credentials. We never had a ticket. You didn't need one when you're with Bill. The BW on this credential said it all. Eventually, we ended up on stage. That's right, on the back of the stage. As Mickey Hart walked out to his drum kit, he stopped and said hello to us. Meanwhile, John Mayer and Bob Weir are strapping up their guitar. The show's ready to go. And eventually, Mickey says, "I need to go too." And Bill says, "Probably good idea for us." And we went to our seats, but not Bill. Bill stood on the floor, all 6'11" of him, extending his arms in rhythm for the 3 hours of the show. Bill Walton, no credentials needed at a Grateful Dead show. What all of us who worked with Bill Walton in television learned is that Bill was a great teammate. Of course, those he played with at UCLA, with the Portland Trail Blazers, and with Boston Celtics knew that as well. Bill was an exceptional teammate. He cared about other people. He knew everyone's name. But Bill's greatest teammate of all, Lori, his wife of 33 years. The rock and the foundation that Bill needed and depended upon. Lori ran everything. She ran everything in Bill's life. She supported him when Bill struggled. She was an extraordinary mother, grandmother figure, but most importantly, a friend. And that's what I'll remember most about Bill, was his greatest teammate, Lori. Part of Bill Walton's Grateful Dead experience was renowned. Every New Year's Eve, Bill loved being Father Time at a Grateful Dead show. This past New Year's Eve would turn out to be Bill's last, and there was no Dead and Company show. Bob Weir was playing on his own in South Florida. Bill Walton was with me at Stanford doing a basketball game on New Year's Eve late in the afternoon. After the game, Bill and Lori, my wife and I, went to dinner in Palo Alto to a Mediterranean restaurant we had introduced Bill to. But Bill needed to eat quickly because he and Lori were jumping in their car and driving from Palo Alto to Berkeley. That's at least an hour drive, so that Bill could be Father Time on New Year's Eve with Jerry's Middle Finger, a Jerry Garcia tribute band named not for a vile reference, but rather for the fact that Jerry became an accomplished guitarist, having lost part of his middle finger in his youth. That was Bill Walton. Even with no formal Dead and Company show, he was still going to be Father Time one last time. There wasn't a single game that went by in the 12 years that I worked with Bill where he wasn't asked, sometimes harassed and hounded for signatures. And Bill was extraordinary, consistent. Never once would he sign for anybody before a game, but he would tell them, come back after the game. And Bill was true to his word. We would finish our work, we'd pack up, and there would be lines. Sometimes it could be 50, 75 people deep, and Bill would wait after the game and patiently sign for everyone. But what was astounding was that 3/4 of the people I saw in the 12 years that asked Bill for autographs were young. People that never saw him play, that never knew what a great player and Hall of Famer he was, but they knew him for the persona he created on television. It was an extraordinary experience to see Bill Walton in that light.
I'm Roxy Bernstein, the ESPN and longtime broadcast partner of Bill Walton from ESPN and the Pac-12 Network. And my first time that I ever worked with Bill was an NIT game way back, now about 13 years ago. And it was in San Francisco at USF, and LSU was playing the USF Dons on the Hilltop. And I'd never worked with Bill, and so of course I'm a little nervous, uneasy maybe, like what am I in store for, what's going to happen? And so we're at shoot-around walkthrough early in the day. And I walked up to introduce myself to Bill and tell him how excited I am to work with him, and he looks at me, he goes, what's your name again? And I go, Roxy. Roxy? I'm Bill, with 2 L's. I hear we're working together tonight. Yes, Bill. And then I tried to have a conversation. He goes, Roxy, save it for air. And that was the extent of our conversation that morning. Then we go do the game that night, and we're about 45 seconds, maybe 30 seconds until we go on air. And Bill looks over at me again, and he says, what's your name again? I go, Roxy. Yeah, Roxy, right. I'm Bill. Let's have fun. You can ask me anything you want, and I'll do my best not to get you fired. I fly down to San Diego to take Bill and his wife Lori to go see Counting Crows. One of my friends is singer of Counting Crows. And Bill was excited. He'd met Adam Duritz a couple times, but he was real excited to see the band. And as we all know, Bill loved his music. And so we go down to Chula Vista, the amphitheater down there south of San Diego, and we go early to hang out backstage. And the band is so excited that Bill was going to be there that night. They can't wait. and they're just mesmerized by Bill backstage. We're hanging out for about an hour before the show, talking. Everybody's coming into the room, and they're just engulfing in Bill stories. And then they're kind of getting ready to go on air as they're the headlining act, and live, the band was opening up for Counting Crows before. And so about 10 minutes before the show, Bill, Lori, and I make our way around the side of the stage, and we're heading out to the front to go to our seats. And we encounter the band live over on the side of the stage as we're walking out. And one of the guys goes, "Bill Walton, oh my gosh, huge fan. Hey guys, how are you?" As Bill is making his way through. And, "Oh, Bill, I love watching you play. You're so funny. You're great to watch on TV. Oh, what do you guys do?" "Oh, we're with Live." And so Bill thought they were with Live Nation, the group that puts on concerts. And he goes, "Oh, I love what you guys do. I go to your concerts all the time. Live Nation, yeah, you guys rock." And the guy goes, No. We're with the band Live. We just played." And Bill looks at him and goes, "Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys are great. I loved every second of it." Hate to break it to the guys from Live. Bill didn't see 1 second of the show. So we go out to get ready. Crows are about to come on. In the entirety of the Counting Crow set, 2 hours, Bill was standing, dancing as you can imagine Bill being at this show and having the time of his life. So we're leaving the amphitheater after, and Adam calls me from the tour bus like 5-10 minutes after they were off stage. They're getting out and we're trying to get out. And Adam says to me, "Bill may have been my favorite audience member ever."
I'm Matt Muehlebach, and this week on Walton Wednesdays, rather than one guest, we're going to have several that had the privilege of working with Big Bill. I was one of them, and one of my first interactions with him, I was doing the radio for Arizona basketball. He came over before the game, as he often did, wanted to hear about the players, who they were, what they were about, not the stats, but what made them tick. And at the end of our little discussion, he said, "Who's your Pac-12 player of the year?" And I thought about it. I said, "Nick Johnson," very confidently. And he shot back, "State your case," which I was kind of laughing like I am now, but he wasn't. He wanted to know. So I fumbled around and stated my case. I felt like a law student talking to a law professor that was asking me a question. And I told him at the end of my case. He looked around, honestly, for about 10 seconds, didn't even respond, and then looked off into sort of Bill Walton land, Neverland, and said, "Well done, Matt," and then walked away. And then I didn't see him for a couple weeks. Typical interaction with Big Bill. Another that I have to mention, I did the Pac-12 studio for about 6 years on site at T-Mobile Arena. He was the announcer, and we would interact often before and after timeouts and halftime. And one year, he out of the blue nicknamed me the Golden Lion. And I don't know why. I'm not sure where it came from. But it was an incredibly generous gesture on his part. It elevated me, gave me, cachet, gave me the cool factor that I probably didn't have. And he just did it because he cared, because he was trying to help me. And that was Bill. I mean, he loved people. He loved basketball. He loved the Pac-12. He loved life. He loved music. He loved his bike. And he loved so many things. And as I said, elevated and helped so many people. And for that, thank you for your life, Big Bill. Now, let's get back to the game.
My name's Theo Robertson, played basketball at the University of California, Berkeley, from 2005 to 2010. And I have such great memories of the legend, Bill Walton, from being a fan of the Pac-12 conference for so long. Had the opportunity to just be in this conference, compete at the same place that he once did. And by the time I was done playing, had the opportunity to be around Bill a little bit while working for the Warriors alongside his son Luke. And you could just feel his warm energy, his big heart, was so gracious with his time. And it was a year later that I actually was able to spend more time with Bill, joining Luke when he first took the job with the Los Angeles Lakers prior to that season. I remember going out to the house in San Diego, and he just opened his doors to me, welcomed me in, made me feel like another one of his sons, and I think that's exactly who Bill Walton is. Just the most gracious, kind, loving person, and certainly a one-of-a-kind talent, and then an even better person, so he's dearly missed.
Hi, I'm Rich Burk. Bill Walton was known for many things, but lost in the mix of the Grateful Dead and the truck stops and the crowning of semi-good players as the center of the known universe, lost in the shtick was the fact that Bill had a really good basketball mind. He was excellent at breaking down the game. I'll never forget what the renowned big man said about evaluating big men. He said, "You'll know a 7-footer's a good basketball player if he'd still play basketball if he were 6 feet tall." That always stuck with me. Over the years of calling college and professional sports, I've had the opportunity to work with more than 100 broadcast partners. To my dismay, I never worked with Bill. I had a chance some years back. They called me a couple of weeks out and asked me if I would work 2 basketball games with Bill Walton as my broadcast partner. I had to say no as I had a previous engagement, and I always hoped I would get another chance. I'm reminded of a hilarious moment between Bill and Roxy Bernstein a couple of years ago. They were calling a game, and Bill was doing his shtick. And out of the clear blue, he says, "Rox, have you ever been through a really difficult situation?" And Roxy said, "Bill, I'm going through one right now." I would have loved the opportunity to go through that really difficult situation, and it's an enduring regret that I'll never get the chance.
Growing up in Pennsylvania, every weekend was dedicated to watching sports on television. Well, in the winter, it was the NBA. And when you watch the NBA in the winter, it was always Bill Walton. I can remember hearing his voice. I knew him as a player, of course, but watching him deliver an open to a broadcast, hearing his energy throughout a broadcast, immediately said to myself, like, wow, what a cool career that might be. Well, fast forward about 25 years, and I'm broadcasting a basketball game with his dear friend and longtime partner, Theo Robertson, and my dear friend as well. He is the analyst, and there I am, the sideline reporter. They sent it over to my very first hit of the game, and I'm nervous and I'm excited, and I think it was a USC's new basketball arena at the Galen Center. And instead of saying, "Hey, what are we gonna see today from so-and-so?" he says, "Hey, Yogi, how'd you get your name?" And it just began this conversation throughout the entire broadcast where we talked about the origin of my name. Well, that moment led to Bill Walton and I always connecting every March in Las Vegas in the basketball tournament, texting throughout the football season as Ted and I would call an epic game, and he'd be watching with his family back at home. And I think every time I saw him when I net out now, because we all miss him so dearly, is that he made everybody feel seen. Whether it was a kid who grew up watching him like myself, or a rookie sideline reporter, or even when I was calling football games. And I know he's done it to thousands and thousands of other people. Ever since his passing, one of the most powerful things is hearing the stories from other passerbys that he would meet in airports, meet at concerts, and they would just talk about the grace that he had for all of them. You know, Bill Walton was larger than life, but he acted as though and made sure that you knew he was just living in the same life that all of us are. And for that, I'm always gonna miss him, always gonna remember him, and hopefully try to channel some of that magnificent energy, humor. I don't think I'll ever be as talented as him, but man, I can always aspire to do something, right, Bill?
You know, when you grow up with initials, you get asked hundreds, even thousands of times, what do your initials stand for? In my case, I'm JB. John Bradley is my full name. At least I thought it was, until that fateful night I worked a basketball game with Bill Walton, and in rhetorically asking, what does JB stand for, he also had his own answer or guess, just barely, as in, you're just barely qualified to be here sitting next to me calling this basketball game. Of course, with Bill, it was a friendly bit, but for my loved ones who watched that night, they got a huge kick out of it, and occasionally, they will still call me just barely in honor of the late, great Bill Walton. As much fun as it was to work with Bill Walton on TV and in the arena, I really enjoyed his presence even more in those quiet moments away from it. And one night I was invited to share a meal with him in Eugene, Oregon during basketball season with our great friend Theo Robertson, our producer David Feldman, our director Lori Brooks. And when you understand the life that Bill has led, the people that he's intersected with, it's no wonder he has more great stories than just about anyone I've come in contact with. And so I was very much looking forward to that dinner, to just watch him hold court, to spend 2 hours hearing him pour out some of the wisdom that he's accumulated over his years. And what surprised me and what changed my thinking about who Bill was and what made him so special is I'm not sure he told a single story that entire night. Though we would have loved to have pried it out of him, to the extent that he held court, he controlled the conversation by asking questions. He had this insatiable curiosity, and he always wanted to know more about what was going on in your life and what mattered to you. And so it's no wonder that when he was on the air, all of those hours that he devoted to accumulating the knowledge and the stories about people that made them so compelling, he was able to share with all of us. But again, I think it was a great lesson that someone like Bill, who I think people misinterpreted because of the way he was on the air, that it was some kind of shtick or that it was about him. No, quite the opposite. When you got to know Bill, when you got to spend an hour with Bill, you'd be surprised at how little of the conversation had anything to do with him and how much of it was driven by his questions and his curiosity about you.
So I remember the first time I met Bill Walton, it was 2013. We were hosting a Chalk Talk for sponsors at the Pac-12 men's basketball tournament in Las Vegas. And I had this script with a bunch of people that I was supposed to thank before I actually introduced Bill. And I think I got through, "Hello everyone, we are so happy to," before he jumped in and said, "How happy are we, Ashley, to share this beautiful stage together and to share our lives with all of these beautiful people. This is the Pac-12. This is the Conference of Champions." And for the next 30 minutes, he sat perched on this throne of 5 stacked chairs and delivered what came to be one of his many master classes on how to make a group of strangers feel like old friends. The thing I want to make sure that people understand for all of his off-the-wall comments, and there were quite a few of those, but I want people to know how much Bill Walton prepared for a broadcast. And it didn't maybe always translate that way on TV, but that's just because his preparation was different than everyone else's. He would sit down with the sports information director at Shoot-Around and ask all sorts of questions. Almost none of them were ever about basketball. But he always wanted to know the backstories of where people grew up, or what they liked to eat, or who their favorite musician was. He didn't just want to tell the stories of the superstars either. That was one of my favorite things about him. He went out of his way to learn about the volunteer assistant, the longtime usher, or even, the game clock operator. And a lot of times he would decide to tell those stories during critical moments of a game, which I think maybe bothered a few people here and there. But here's the thing about Bill. He was always going to make sure that his audience left with something that they were not expecting to learn. And I think he really embodied my 2 favorite human traits, which are curiosity and enthusiasm. Bill Walton was a walking billboard of gratitude. That man loved and appreciated life in a way that only someone who had been through the darkest of days, I think, could. And I always really admired about him that he never shied away from talking about that darkness. So I just like to say to the Bill with 2 L's, thank you for sharing your life and your light with us. We are indeed the luckiest people on earth, and forevermore, I will always be able to say, I knew Bill Walton. Shine on, my friend.
When I first got assigned to work with Bill Walton, my first thought was, I wish my father was alive, because I think my father would have thought that was really cool. I called my brothers and told them. And then I thought, well, I better get prepared for this. And so I called a lot of his consistent, usual play-by-plays, and they all told me the same thing. Bill will not talk to you before the game. He's going to want to save it for the air, so don't get insulted, don't think it's you. But my phone rang not long after the assignment was assigned, and it was Bill. And he said, Anne-Marie, this is Bill Walton. I'm calling to tell you that I'm not going to talk to you because I want to save it for the air. And I said, yes, Bill, I heard that. And he goes, goodbye. And that was our call. It was 10 seconds, maybe. And Bill had, for our game, it was a UCLA men's basketball game, and he had, I swear, 27 pages of notes, and they're handwritten. And he was ready, and I had studied Grateful Dead references, all kinds of things, just to be prepared, because I didn't know what I was in for. But one of the things I didn't prepare for is, at one point, he said to me, Emery, do you have any grandchildren? And I said, Bill, on the air, how is it that you have 27 pages of notes and nowhere in there does it say I have a first grader? And he just started laughing, and I laughed, and he was just such a lovely man, made time, maybe the smartest person I've ever worked with, and a really memorable experience. But I don't know that he had had a female play-by-play before, and it didn't affect him in any way. He was just genuinely Bill Walton. And there was a memory I'll carry with me forever.
In Bill's memory, the Waltons warmly encourage donations to the UC San Diego Foundation. Proceeds benefit the Dr. Stephen Garfin Orthopedic Surgery Clinic, named after Bill's spine surgeon and friend, here with wife Cheryl. For more information, visit give2.ucsd.edu. Search and select Hillcrest Outpatient Pavilion Fund.
Hi, welcome back to Walton Wednesdays, a special producer's edition. I'm Michael Molinari. I had the privilege of working with Bill at the Pac-12 Network for 12 years. As the producer of the show, I'm responsible for the past, the replays, and the future, what we're going to do. I work beside the director who decides the moment-by-moment cuts as the show goes on. Initially, when Bill and I started, it was definitely I was working for Bill. It might have been a touch adversarial, but as we worked along, we became more collaborative. We began to work with each other, and I think towards the later years, we became great friends. I think the thing I enjoyed most about working with Bill was he was fueled by curiosity. Everything he did was based upon, I want to learn more about the person that we're going to be showing tonight. He loved to come early to the shoot-arounds and talk to as many players as he could, filling up his notebook. If you ever saw him on the sidelines, the yellow notepad, everything was handwritten, and he was prepared to go. Off the court, I think the thing I enjoyed most about working with Bill was the post-game dinners. One that jumps out at me was the last time we had dinner in Las Vegas, the day the world stopped, or at least took a pause, in March of 2020, when the pandemic hit. We had just done a game, and we went to the Aria, a special Asian restaurant in the Aria. Bill always picked the restaurant, but Bill always paid, so that was okay. Anyway, the topics had nothing to do with basketball, nothing to do with who was playing the next day. A little bit obviously about what was going on in the world, but then we branched off. We had a great discussion about the Electoral College that went on for about 25 minutes. I like to think I won that one, but I don't know. And then we had a good 5 minutes on unfiltered sake. And Bill was fascinated. He wanted to know everything I knew about unfiltered sake that I was drinking. So that was the curiosity. That's what made being with Bill, having dinner with Bill, working with Bill such a pleasure.
The thing about Bill Walton that I think goes unappreciative is how hard he actually worked and prepared. Yeah, the game starts and he goes off on his tangents and he tells stories and you just kind of have to follow along with him. But what people don't realize is that before the game, he goes to shoot around, he goes to practice, he talks to players, he gets their stories, he writes copious notes. He's got all this information at his fingertips. He was a really spectacular broadcaster. I know he could be just off the cuff and your crazy thoughts, but it was the preparation. So when you got a really good game and a close game, that he was on top of it. And mean, obviously he knows basketball, so he'd break down the strategy. So he could go either or. Working with Bill was always a treat because you never knew where he was going to go. And I was fortunate enough to produce his last game. We were in Oregon. And I'll never forget this. He sends me a picture from the elevator at Matthew Knight Arena, because in the elevator was this like list of goals that Phil Knight posted. And he just happened to see it, takes the picture, sends it to me and says, I want to talk about this. And it becomes a great segment during the show. And that's kind of what Bill was like. Things that you wouldn't even think of, he would see. And it was an amazing honor to work with him.
Welcome back to Walton Wednesdays. I always like to say you can judge a person's character by how they treat the people that can't do anything for them. And this is probably my favorite Bill Walton story. It was in the dog days of February. He probably had 3 games that week. We were in Arizona for an Arizona game in Tucson. And Bill had a Colorado game the night before, late start, probably didn't finish till 10 o'clock. Sure, he had a ride to that airport in Colorado. We know that takes about 3 hours to get there from Boulder. And he was there at 10 a.m. for the shoot around though. And he came in exhausted. I went in to say hello. He just kind of looked at me. Let's talk about anything else later. I just want to get through the shoot around and get back to the room, take a nap, recharge. And I understood that. So I walked back, and on my way to the truck, there was a young man who came up to me, and he had a severe stutter. And for those who don't know, Bill Walton overcame one of the most serious stutters you'll ever see. If you see old footage of him back at UCLA, he could barely speak, but he persevered and overcame his stuttering problem. Anyway, this young man said, "Do you think Mr. Walton would have time for me? I want to ask his advice on overcoming my stutter." And I said to him, "He's exhausted. Maybe he'll give you his phone number. He can get back to you later. Maybe he'll have some time after the game, but he's cooked. He just came in, didn't get any sleep." So I go back into the truck. I sit down, I start talking to the graphics people. I turn around, I look at the monitor, and lo and behold, I see Bill and that young man start talking, and they probably spoke for 30 minutes. And that's the thing that jumps out to me about Bill Walton. Always willing to help, always willing to try to make someone's life better. And I will never forget that moment. I'll never forget what he did for that young man.
I had the distinct pleasure of being Bill Walton's producer for almost 15 years on Pac-12 basketball. And of all the wild and crazy things Bill did, both on and off the air, one moment stands out in particular. Early February of 2019, Washington at Arizona State. We'd come back from halftime, and we were going to review the first half highlights. But before that, his longtime play-by-play partner and great friend, Dave Pasch, pulled out 2 cupcakes. They proceeded to light them, and they were going to sing happy birthday to their producer. But before that could happen, Dave turned to Bill and challenged him to take a bite out of the lit cupcake, which of course Bill did without hesitation. We all fell over laughing. Bill, we miss you. We miss your authenticity, your generosity, and the love of life that you brought every day to the people around you. Miss you, big man.
My name is Ernie Kent, former head basketball coach, University of Oregon, former player, University of Oregon, and I want to just take a few minutes to talk about my good friend, Bill Walton. My first association with him was as a player. In my freshman year in 1973, they came to MacArthur Court, Bill Walton, John Wooden, and I saw him warming up, and I just thought, my gosh, what a great player he is. Just the way he warmed up, and athleticism, the size, and fortunately, though, it was one of the few times we were able to beat them in that ball game. I don't think there's many teams that could say we beat them 4 times. They beat us 4 times during their heyday at UCLA. Later on, in 1977, he won the first championship in a long time for the Portland Trail Blazers and was an integral part of that program as well. My association with him did not end there, however. Him and I had the unique opportunity to venture over to Canida, Oregon, which is a resort in eastern Oregon, and we put on a clinic for the Native American tribes over there. And the clinic was a fun clinic, but when the kids took a break, Bill and I would stay in the gym and play wiffle ball. Of course, when he pitched, I knocked it to one end of the gym, and when I pitched, he knocked it to one end of the gym. So I don't know if we were good hitters or just bad pitchers. But it was then that I started to really understand and get to know him as a person. And later as a colleague and working with him, the thing I came to know about him is I've never met a human being with the type of spirit that he has in him, the spirit and caring for other people. He would always ask about my mom, I would ask about his mom, and I never saw a situation where he did not take time out for someone on the road at one of these games, whether it was a picture, an autograph, or a conversation. And I think when you meet somebody like that in your life, particularly with another fellow man, I just thought, again, his compassion for people, his compassion for his fellow man is second to none with me. And his tremendous heart, character, smile, wit, all of those things that go into it. He left a legacy that'll never be replaced. Just a remarkable athlete, but even more so, a remarkable man and a good friend that is truly, truly missed.
In Bill's memory, the Waltons warmly encourage donations to the UC San Diego Foundation. Proceeds benefit the Dr. Stephen Garfin Orthopedic Surgery Clinic, named after Bill's spine surgeon and friend, here with wife Cheryl. For more information, visit give2.ucsd.edu. Search and select Hillcrest Outpatient Pavilion Fund.
Do the stories about Bill Walton ever end? Does somebody not have a story about Bill Walton? The everyman that just touched every person? Well, throw another log on the fire, because here comes my 2 cents. I remember when I first started working at Coin TV back in 1989, and when the Blazers were making NBA title runs, we brought Bill in at Coin TV to sit on the desk with us and give us expert analysis. I believe that was Bill's first foray into broadcasting, into television, and he was an absolute natural. I moved to Portland hearing about Bill Walton. When I got to Portland, I was able to access all the archival video and just watch him do his thing with the Blazers. But meeting him in person topped everything. Just watching him, how he worked the room in such a genuine way, and how he remembered everybody's name, greeted everybody, cheered for everybody. It was neat to be a part of his world. Fast forward, X amount of years later, he's rocking and rolling in the TV world, the broadcast world by then. I leave Coin TV and I'm doing some freelance work, and I'm writing an article for the local sports section for the Oregonian. It's going to be on our heroes. So of course, Bill's on the top of the list. Who was Bill Walton's hero? Of course, he gives me all kinds of time. I'm interviewing him. We go on and on and on. And he says, you need to talk to Coach Wooden. I'm thinking, well, sure, who wouldn't want to do that? And he said, no, we're going to get off the phone right now. I'm going to call Coach Wooden, and I'm going to tell him that you're going to be calling in just a few minutes. He's going to love it. I'm thinking, okay. So Bill calls me back and says, okay, here's his number, go. So I pick up the phone. I'm calling Coach Wooden. And he picks up the phone on about the second ring. I introduce myself and he says, Ann, William told me you would be calling. Nell and I are just sitting down to lunch. We're having grilled cheese and tomato soup. Could you call back in a half an hour? Sure, Coach. Anything you want? Heck yeah, I can call back in a half hour. So we have the most wonderful chat about Bill. The most robust, rich, genuine, authentic chat about Bill. And I'll never forget it to this day. Bill Walton, one of the all-time greats, but one of the all-time great persons that I've ever met. I remember distinctly, I'll leave you with this, talking to some folks who are riding bikes in Portland. It's a really bike-friendly city, as you know, and they say up bikes Bill Walton, that frame on a bike, and he says, mind if I tag along? And they're cycling together, total strangers, but not really, because by the end of the bike ride, they're best of pals, and that was Bill Walton. Always made you feel a part of. That was Bill Walton.
I didn't meet Bill Walton until 1990, but I had already had this great respect for him and saw him as just this larger-than-life, iconic basketball figure and popular culture figure as well. I grew up in Indiana. I graduated in 1974 from high school, so I was a few years behind Bill, but recognized what he had achieved at UCLA and those great UCLA teams. John Wooden, having been born and raised in Indiana, of course, played for Purdue. We in Indiana were all big Wooden fans and not so much UCLA fans, but we loved Wooden. And we really respected everything that UCLA did in those days and the way that Bill played. So I followed, like everybody else, I followed Bill's trajectory as an NBA player and as a cultural figure as well through the 70s. And I finally got a chance to meet Bill in 1990 when he began his broadcast career, I believe, with the Los Angeles Clippers. He was working alongside the great Ralph Lawler. And I remember being just so impressed at Bill Walton reaching out to me and introducing himself to me and asking from me information about the Sonics roster, coaching staff, philosophies, and so forth. And I remember how important that made me feel and what a great deal of respect I felt from Bill Walton, and wanted to do everything that I possibly could, obviously, to build on that relationship and maintain the respect that we had. And so through the years, we stayed in contact. Actually did a couple of broadcasts with him. Remember how what a great feeling that was, and just having a lot of fun with Bill, doing a few of those games, playoff games for Turner, I believe it was. And later, Bill would stay in contact through text, leave a phone message. He would make the frequent travels to Portland, and after I started working here with the Portland Trailblazers in the first couple of years, Bill was outstanding in his public support of me as a new guy up here in Portland, even with all those relationships that I had in Seattle. And so I can't thank Bill Walton enough for all his support over these years, and just saddened by the loss of just a great man, an old soul, and I'd like to say a friend, Bill Walton.
I had prostate cancer 20 years or so ago. I had surgery to remove it from my body. The surgery went very well, and early in my recovery, Bill Walton and his wife Lori were our first visitors at our home in Laguna Niguel, California, an hour and a half maybe north of the Walton spread in San Diego. It was great to see them both, and we just had a precious time reminiscing and simply being together. 2 weeks later, I'm feeling much better by then. Bill and Lori return, this time to take us out to dinner in nearby Dana Point. Bill was so generous with his time. He just never seemed to be able to do enough for the people he cared about. So many, I think, just know Bill from his huge volume of work on television. They happily remember his hyperbolic rants about things that seemed to have little to do with the game at hand. Well, I spent 13 years with Bill at my side calling LA Clipper games on television, and I can tell you, when the game was on the line, Bill would offer enlightening insight to explain what had just happened, or perhaps suggest what to look for next. He was a Hall of Fame broadcaster, just as he was a Hall of Fame player. Most of all, he was a Hall of Fame man. And that was further revealed during that dinner 2 decades ago on my first night out after my prostate surgery. During the course of the dinner, Bill asked my wife what she was up to this offseason. Joe said she was going to get back into bicycle riding. That, of course, was one of Bill's absolute passions. He said, you're going to need a really good bike. And he knew this guy in San Diego who could fit her with a perfect ride. We said, great. And a couple of weeks later, headed down to purchase the bike. We got there and were shown this beautiful two-wheeler. I asked, okay, what do we owe you? The response was, oh, nothing. Bill took care of it. Let me assure you, Bill took care of so much for so many.
Well, it's really an honor to have a moment to be able to say a few things about my good friend Bill Walton, who I surely miss. He hasn't been gone long, but I miss him so much already. We all know about his deep love, his abiding love for the game of basketball, of course, his Bruins and his beloved Celtics. We all know that. And of course, we got to hear him on so many broadcasts. I was so fortunate to work with him on many of those events, covering Pac-12 games and, of course, the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas. And, you know, I have so many memories from behind the scenes with Bill, and whether I was walking around the arena and maybe having to take a walk back behind the booth, and I'd see him sitting on not one, not two, but three chairs to hold that big frame sitting right next to my man, Ted Robinson, as they call the games. And oh my gosh, I can remember so many of the stories that he would break into that were not basketball related. And I can just imagine producers going, where is he going with this? But Bill always found a way to make those stories work out. And he educated us all, whether you were at home watching or for those of us who were working the games. He had just a thirst for knowledge that was just amazing. And he dropped these little facts in about maybe the venue we were in or the city or something that made the game interesting. A departure, but it made things interesting. That was him all the way. The meals we had together were tremendous. Of course, at the Pac-12 tournament, we'd have those chances to dine with he and Lori and the rest of our team, and they were just wonderful. What a great man and a great family he had, and I know he loved them dearly. But what I'm going to remember the most about Bill really is his humanity. He loved people. He was a man who couldn't hide because of his physical stature, and he didn't. He embraced everybody that he saw. And there are some particular moments that I'll always remember. I brought one of my sons with me to Colorado to do a basketball game, and we were all in the hotel there, and Bill took a moment to give him some words of wisdom about life and about his pursuits in acting. And then we took a great photo out in front of the hotel, and he just was so great with Lucas, and I'll never forget that. I was once emceeing an event in San Diego for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and I guess Bill was supposed to be there as well. I don't know. But he and Lori showed up, and he was just available to all those kids who were there representing their different bases across the country, particularly in that region of the country. And we took another great photo there in front of that event before I went in to MC the event. And he was just all about the kids. And the other one was being at a Pac-12 basketball tournament in Las Vegas, and they were honoring track and field Olympians from the Pac-12. And my good friend and one of the great distance runners, Bernard Lagat, was there. And Bill jumped up out of his seat to come out and take a picture with Lagat and myself on the court. And, you know, for me, those are the moments that I remember about Bill Walton. It was his love for basketball. We all know about that. And the way he treated the game and took care of it and tried to forward the game and just showed so much honor and respect for it. But it was the way he dealt with people off camera, the things maybe you never got to see that we saw, that I will always remember. I got to tell you something. The game of basketball is much better because Bill Walton came through here. The game of basketball, sports broadcasting, I'd say indeed our country and the world, is a much better place because Bill Walton came through here. And my heart continues to go out to Lori and his family, sorely missed. But Bill Walton was my man, and I miss him. I miss him so much.
Well, here's a Bill Walton story for you. Probably not what you expect. I spent many years on the road doing events, and at the end of the events, people would come up, line up, to tell me that they had met Bill, or that they had met Coach Wooden. And the point of this story is something I think will surprise you, because every person who came up to me had the same thing to say. He was so interested in me. couldn't believe how curious he was. He spent so much time with me. He made me feel seen. See, the funny thing is that, you know the old expression, you can't tell a book by its cover. Who looked more different than John Wooden and Bill Walton? But at their core, who they were as people, the way they interfaced with others, John Wooden and Bill Walton were the same guy. I knew them both really well. Took me a long time to figure that one out. But as I thought about it, it was so true. Because people who met them felt uplifted, felt energized, and in truth inspired by the attention that they were given by someone that they admired so much. So there's my Bill Walton story, one you won't hear from anybody else. Bill Walton and John Wooden were the same guy.
Hello, I'm Lionel Hollins. I had the good fortune of playing with Bill Walton in Portland and also in San Diego with the San Diego Clippers. I first met Bill when I came to Portland. I was drafted by Portland, and Bill took me around, introduced me to his family and his friends, and we worked out together. We would go to La Prince's gym and lift weights, and then we'd run up the Mount Tabor and back. And then we would get in the car and go find a gym to play one-on-one. And he treated me like I was a brother from the time that I met him. He's a good man, good heart, loyal friend, would do anything for people. And he loved people. And he was empathetic for the plight of people in the world. And he stood up for those types of things. And no matter what your agreements or disagreements with Bill were, you loved him because he was genuine and he cared. My stories of Bill were, the fact that he gave me a couple of great nuggets. One, don't envy people and their success. If they get their success because of you or before you. And that was a good lesson to learn, because when you're striving to be somebody in the league, you want it, and you're jealous of someone who gets it as a young, immature person. And he also taught me that you don't have to play poorly when you lose. And I took that to heart, that even if we were not winning the game, to go out there and continue to try to be the best I could on the court. And that was both of those were good lessons for me to learn. And I just thank him for his friendship. And I'm glad that I was blessed rather to be in his life and he in my life. So we had many conversations, many phone conversations, face to face. I had the opportunity to live with him for a minute in San Diego. So, I got to know Bill really well, and he stayed in contact until the end. And I cherish that relationship that I had with him, and I'm going to miss him.
Hi, it's Bob Costas. So many things can be said about the uniquely wondrous, wildly entertaining, and deeply decent Bill Walton, but I'll limit myself to just this one observation. Over the last several years, every communication I had with Bill, whether in person, on the phone, or through a text, ended with him saying, "Thank you, Bob. Thank you for my life." And for a while, I thought, this is really over the top, even for Bill, who, as we know, was no stranger to hyperbole. But then more recently, I think I figured it out. Bill viewed his life as a beautiful mosaic, and that it certainly was. And even someone like me, who didn't do all that many games with him, wasn't his teammate, wasn't a family member, just a friendly acquaintance, but even someone like me was accorded a little chip in that big, beautiful mosaic. Larger pieces of that mosaic went, of course, to Laurie, and to his kids, and to his teammates at UCLA or with the Trailblazers or with the Celtics, to John Wooden or to Jack Ramsey, or to broadcast partners who spent much more time on the air with him than I did, Dave Pasch, Tom Hammond, the late, great Steve Snapper Jones. Taken together, the big pieces, the medium-sized pieces, and the tiny ones, taken together, it was all part of that mosaic, all part of that uniquely wonderful life. So now I get to thank you, and thank you, Bill, for making me part of the mosaic of your unforgettable life.
When it comes to Bill Walton, we all have memories. Some of us are more blessed to have stories, and the story I want to share with y'all is Bill inviting me to dinner at his home in San Diego, which started back in Connecticut when I had a talk with him when he was working for ESPN, and I said, Bill, where do you live? And he said, I live in San Diego. And I said, oh, I got a brother that lives in San Diego. And he said, well, then you must come to my house for dinner next time you're visiting your brother. And I'm like, wow. Did Bill Walton just invite me to dinner? I'm like, oh, this is a guy that I grew up, like, you know, it was my guy in the mid-'70s. My dad took me to Portland Trailblazer games, and here I am just trying not to be Beavis and Butthead next to him. And he's invited me to dinner. And now a whole nother year comes by, and I run into Bill, and by chance I'm going to be going to San Diego to see my brother, and I tell Bill, and Bill says, well, then you must come to dinner. And I'm like, what's that mean? And he said, well, you know, we pick a date, you come to San Diego, you call me, I'll tell you where I live, and you come. And I said, who can I invite? And he said, you can invite anybody you want. And I said, well, I've got to invite my brother, obviously, who I'm visiting. And then I invited my stepdad, who actually was a basketball coach, actually hunted with John Wooden's brother, whole other story, another brother of mine and a buddy of mine. And so I tell Bill, and I said, hey, Bill, by the way, the brother I'm going to visit in San Diego is a DEA agent. He is, true story, Jack Robertson, Google. And Bill says, remind me of that several more times before you come to dinner. I did. We went to dinner, and Bill and Lori were the most gracious hosts. They had a chef in there. Maybe that was their everyday thing, but it seemed like it was just for us. The new Neil Young album was playing on a reel-to-reel. Oh, Ordinary People. Greatest host, greatest night, end of the night, hand to God, hand to Bill. I'm butt naked in a hot tub with Bill Walton drinking an adult beverage. If there's a better story, I want to hear it.